The sun gleamed brightly over the sleek lineup of cars at Max's Elite Motors, a high-end dealership known for catering to affluent clients. Max, the owner, was a man who thrived on appearances and persuasion. He prided himself on his ability to upsell anything, even vehicles with questionable histories, as long as the buyer had deep enough pockets. Today, Max felt particularly confident when he spotted Jason Statham strolling through the lot. "Ah, Mr. Statham," Max greeted, flashing his most charming smile. "A man of action deserves a car that matches his boldness." Jason raised an eyebrow but said nothing, his sharp gaze scanning the rows of pristine vehicles. What Max did not know was that Jason was not just here to buy a car, he was here to test something far more important, Max's integrity. And Max was about to fail in ways he never saw coming. Max Russo was the king of charm, a man who could sell sand in the desert and make you believe it was gold. As the owner of Max's Elite Motors, he was the go-to dealer for luxury cars, or at least, that was the image he cultivated. Dressed in custom-tailored suits, his gel-slicked hair shining under the fluorescent lights, and a constant smirk on his face, Max had a reputation for being a smooth talker. He boasted that no customer ever walked off his lot without buying something, whether they wanted to or not. The dealership itself mirrored Max's personality, flashy but hollow. From the outside, it looked like a palace for automotive enthusiasts, with gleaming glass walls, luxury banners, and a marble-lined showroom. The lot displayed a parade of high-end cars, sleek sports cars, elegant sedans, and SUVs with more features than most people would ever need. But beneath the shiny exterior, Max's Elite Motors had a darker side. Max's business thrived on deception. The cars he sold as luxury vehicles often came with hidden flaws, a faulty engine, cheap replacement parts, or dubious origins. His specialty was taking damaged or counterfeit luxury cars, sprucing them up with just enough polish to fool even the keenest eye, and slapping on exorbitant price tags. "As long as it looks good, they'll buy it," Max often told his staff, laughing at the gullibility of his customers. But Max's tactics went beyond selling defective cars. His financing schemes were even more sinister. He preyed on buyers who were dazzled by the thought of owning their dream car, roping them into predatory loans with skyrocketing interest rates and hidden fees. Many of his clients ended up drowning in debt, their credit ruined, and their shiny new cars repossessed within months. Max, however, saw no reason to lose sleep over it. "It's business," he'd shrug, "not personal." The staff at Max's Elite Motors either admired or feared him. To his employees, Max was a mix of mentor and tyrant. He demanded results, cared little for ethics, and rewarded those who followed his lead. "It's all about the hustle," he would say. "The smarter you play, the richer you get." Despite his shady operations, Max's charisma and attention to detail kept him out of trouble. Clients were drawn in by the showroom's allure, dazzled by the gleam of freshly waxed cars and Max's silver tongue. Few ever thought to look beyond the surface, and those who did rarely had the resources to hold him accountable. Today, however, would be different. Unbeknownst to Max, the customer who had just walked into his dealership was not another gullible buyer. Jason Statham was about to shine a light on every crack in Max's operation, exposing the man behind the mask. The stage was set, and Max had no idea that his perfectly crafted world was about to crumble. Max's eyes lit up the moment Jason walked into the dealership. Dressed casually in a leather jacket and jeans, Jason didn't scream wealthy buyer, but Max had learned never to judge a book by its cover. There was something about the way Jason carried himself. Calm, confident, and just detached enough to suggest he wasn't there for a bargain. Max saw a potential payday. "Welcome to Max's Elite Motors," Max greeted, his polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor as he approached. "I'm Max Russo, the man who's about to make your car dreams come true. What brings you in today?" Jason looked around the showroom, his eyes landing on a sleek black sports car. "I heard you have the McLaren 720S. Always wanted to take a closer look." Max's grin widened. The McLaren 720S was one of his most prized showroom pieces. Or at least, that's what he wanted people to believe. "Ah, you've got good taste, my friend. The 720S is a masterpiece. Lightweight carbon fiber construction, 710 horsepower, 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. You'll feel like you're flying on the road." He gestured toward the car, his tone dripping with enthusiasm. This beauty just arrived. Limited edition. You won't find another like it in the state, maybe even the country. Come, take a closer look. Jason followed Max to the McLaren, running his hand lightly over its glossy surface. Up close, the car looked flawless, sleek curves, pristine paint, and gleaming alloy wheels. But Jason's trained eye started noticing small details that didn't add up. The stitching on the leather seats seemed a little off, not as precise as it should have been for a McLaren. The tires, though clean, were not the Pirelli P0s that typically came standard with the 720S. Max, oblivious to Jason's observations, kept talking. This car? She's a one-of-a-kind deal. You're looking at a $350,000 machine, but for you, today only, I'll let her go for $325,000. That's practically stealing it from me. Jason raised an eyebrow, playing along. Why the discount? Doesn't seem like you to take a loss. Max chuckled, waving a dismissive hand. What can I say? I like you. And I've got a buyer lined up for a couple of other cars, so I'm feeling generous today. Plus, I know a man like you recognizes quality when he sees it. No point in haggling when we both know this is worth every penny. Jason nodded, pretending to be impressed. Mind if I check out the engine? Of course, Max said, popping the rear hatch with a flourish. Feast your eyes on this twin-turbocharged V8, pure engineering brilliance. Jason leaned in, carefully examining the engine bay. Most buyers would have been dazzled by the sight, but Jason noticed something strange. The bolts on the engine cover looked newer than the surrounding components, and a faint smell of cheap lubricant lingered in the air. It didn't match the meticulous craftsmanship he'd expect from a McLaren factory build. What's the mileage on this? Jason asked casually. Barely 2,000, Max replied without missing a beat. Practically brand new. The previous owner barely drove it before upgrading to a Bugatti. Lucky for you, he traded it in here. Jason nodded again, his expression neutral. Inside, he was starting to piece things together. The mismatched tires, the off-kilter stitching, the suspiciously new bolts. This wasn't a true McLaren 720S. It was likely a salvaged car, rebuilt with counterfeit parts to pass as a luxury model. Max, sensing hesitation, turned up the charm. Look, I get it. A car like this? It's an investment. But let me sweeten the deal for you. I'll throw in a full 2-year warranty. Covers everything. Engine, transmission, the works. You won't find that kind of guarantee anywhere else. Jason smirked inwardly. A 2-year warranty on a McLaren? Unlikely. Luxury cars like this were backed by factory warranties, not sketchy dealership offers. But he decided to let Max dig his hole deeper. I'm interested, Jason said, his tone measured. But I'd like to take it for a test drive first. Max hesitated for a fraction of a second before recovering. Normally, we don't do test drives for cars in this price range unless there's a deposit. But for you, let's make an exception. Jason crossed his arms, tilting his head slightly. What about the paperwork? I'd like to see the history, ownership records, maintenance logs. Max's grin faltered, just for a moment. Oh, absolutely. I'll have my assistant pull that up for you. In the meantime, why don't we go over the financing options? I can get you approved in minutes. Jason let the conversation flow, all the while filing away every red flag. Max's eagerness to close the deal, his reluctance to provide documentation, and the questionable state of the car all pointed to one thing: a scam. Max leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. Look, Jason, I'm offering you a deal most people would kill for. But I've got another buyer coming in later today who's been eyeing this car. If you're serious, we should move fast. Jason gave a faint smile, his eyes sharp. Oh, I'm serious, Max. Let's keep going. Max thought he had Jason right where he wanted him, but what he didn't know was that Jason was just getting started. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Jason's instincts were sharper than most, honed through years of being both hunter and hunted. As Max rambled on about financing plans, Jason nodded politely, letting the man believe he had taken the bait. In reality, Jason's mind was racing. Every detail he had noticed, the mismatched parts, the odd stitching, the suspicious warranty, painted a much larger picture. This was not just a shady sale. Something much bigger was at play. "I think I'll need a few minutes to think this over," Jason said, standing up from the desk where Max had been running through exaggerated payment plans. "Do you mind if I stretch my legs around the lot?" Max's smile stayed glued to his face, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Sure. Take your time. But remember, Jason, this deal won't last forever." Jason gave a nod and casually walked toward the rear of the dealership, where the employee-only sign hung on a door slightly ajar. He glanced over his shoulder, making sure Max was busy entertaining another customer, before slipping inside. Jason found himself in a dimly lit corridor that smelled faintly of oil and rubber. The sound of muffled voices and the hum of machinery grew louder as he moved deeper into the back rooms. Finally, he came upon a large storage area, shielded by a heavy metal door. Jason pushed it open just enough to peek inside. His eyes widened as he took in the scene. Row after row of cars were lined up under fluorescent lights. At first glance, they looked like an impressive collection of high-end luxury vehicles. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Porsches, and McLarens. But as Jason stepped closer, the illusion began to crumble. The details were wrong. Paint jobs that looked flawless from a distance revealed tiny imperfections up close. Logos on the steering wheels were slightly misaligned. And when Jason popped the hood of one of the cars, he found an engine cobbled together from aftermarket parts, far from the precision engineering of the real deal. Jason's jaw tightened. These were not luxury cars. They were fakes, cleverly disguised to fool even the savviest buyers. Max was not just selling counterfeit cars. He was running an operation that could destroy lives. Jason was about to slip back out when the sound of voices stopped him in his tracks. He ducked behind a stack of tires, his ears straining to pick up the conversation coming from the far side of the room. "You're falling behind, Max," growled a gravelly voice. "I just need more time," Max replied, his usual slick confidence replaced with desperation. "I've got a big fish on the line right now. Once I close this deal, I'll be able to pay you back, plus interest." "You said that last time," the gravelly voice shot back. "Your operation's getting sloppy. If you can't deliver, we'll find someone who can. And let's not forget, you've got more than money on the line here." Jason peeked around the corner and spotted Max standing with two men who looked like they had stepped out of a crime drama. One was short and stocky, with a scar running across his cheek, while the other was tall and lean, his sharp features illuminated by the glow of a cigarette. "Listen," Max pleaded. "This guy's loaded. He's ready to buy the McLaren. Once I reel him in, I'll have enough to cover my debts and keep things running smoothly." The taller man exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes narrowing. "You'd better hope so. Because if you don't, the next time we meet, it won't be for a friendly chat." Jason's fists clenched as he pieced it all together. Max was not just a sleazy dealer. He was caught in a web of crime. The counterfeit cars were part of a larger scheme, likely tied to money laundering and predatory loans. And now, Jason was standing in the middle of it. Jason slipped out of the storage area as quietly as he had entered. His mind was racing, but his movements remained calm and calculated. He knew he had to expose Max, but this was not just about getting his money back. If he made the wrong move, innocent buyers could end up trapped in financial ruin, or worse. He re-entered the showroom, where Max greeted him with a forced smile. "So, Jason, ready to seal the deal?" Jason returned the smile, his eyes unreadable. "Almost. But I think I need one last look at the McLaren." Of course, Max said, leading him back to the car. Jason ran his hand over the hood, pretending to admire the car's sleek lines. "You know, Max, I've been thinking. A car like this, it deserves to be celebrated. How about I bring in a friend of mine? He's a journalist. He loves writing about high-end vehicles. Maybe he can do a little feature on this beauty." Max's face froze for a split second before he forced a laugh. "That's an interesting idea. But we like to keep things low-key here, you know? Exclusive clientele and all that." Jason nodded, his expression neutral. "I get it. Discretion is important in a business like this. Max relaxed slightly, not realizing Jason's words carried a double meaning. As Jason left the dealership that day, he knew he could not let this slide. Max's operation was more than just a scam. It was a criminal empire built on deceit and desperation. Jason had uncovered the truth, but now came the hard part, bringing it all crashing down. The tables were about to turn, and Max had no idea what was coming. Jason returned to the dealership the next day, his demeanor calm but his mind razor-sharp. He had spent the night planning his next move. Max thought he was just another wealthy sucker, but Jason was about to shatter that illusion. As he entered the showroom, Jason made a beeline for Max, who greeted him with his usual slick grin. "Jason, glad to see you back. I knew you couldn't resist the McLaren." Jason smiled faintly. "You're right, Max. I've been thinking a lot about the car. But before we move forward, I have a few questions." Max's confidence flickered for a brief moment. "Questions? Of course. Ask away." Jason leaned closer, his tone casual yet firm. "Tell me, Max, how do you explain the aftermarket engine in a car that's supposed to be factory perfect? And the mismatched VIN numbers? Or the fact that the rare McLaren you're selling me is registered to 3 different owners in 3 different states?" Max's face went pale, but he quickly recovered, laughing nervously. "Jason, there must be some mistake. We have the best vehicles here. Maybe you misunderstood." Jason cut him off, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "No mistakes, Max. I know exactly what this is, a scam. Counterfeit cars, predatory loans, and a side hustle with loan sharks. I know everything." Max's smile vanished completely, replaced by a cold glare. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're treading dangerous ground, mate. Maybe it's time you left." Jason crossed his arms, unfazed. "I'll leave when I'm done here." Max's expression darkened as he subtly pressed a button under his desk. Moments later, 2 large men emerged from the back of the dealership. Jason recognized one of them as the scar-faced thug from the storage room the previous day. "You've got guts coming in here, making accusations," Max sneered. "But guts won't get you far." Jason sighed, shaking his head. "You really think this is going to end well for you?" The taller thug stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "We'll make sure you don't walk out of here, pal." Jason smirked. "Big talk. Let's see if you can back it up." The first punch came fast, but Jason was faster. He sidestepped the swing and delivered a precise jab to the thug's ribcage, making him stagger. The second man lunged at Jason, but Jason grabbed a nearby chair and swung it with precision, sending the man crashing into a display stand. Max shouted, "Get him! Don't let him leave!" The scar-faced thug recovered and charged at Jason again, this time grabbing a tire iron from a nearby workbench. Jason dodged the wild swings, his movements fluid and calculated. When the thug overextended, Jason seized the opportunity, twisting the tire iron out of his hand and using it to deliver a clean blow to the man's shoulder. The second thug tried to catch Jason off guard, but Jason was ready. He ducked under the attack and delivered a swift roundhouse kick that sent the man sprawling. Within minutes, both goons were incapacitated, groaning on the floor. Jason turned to Max, who was now visibly trembling. "You're done, Max," Jason said, his voice ice-cold. "No more scams. No more victims." Max backed away, his hands raised. "Wait. We can work something out. I'll cut you a deal. Anything you want." Jason ignored him and pulled out his phone, dialing a number. "It's time this place got some attention." Max's eyes widened. "Who are you calling?" Jason gave him a cold smile. "The police. And a journalist friend of mine who'll love this story." As Jason made the call, Max tried to bolt toward the back exit. But Jason anticipated the move and blocked his path. "Not so fast." Within minutes, the police arrived, followed closely by a reporter Jason had tipped off. The officers quickly took Max into custody, and the journalist began documenting the counterfeit cars and shady paperwork scattered throughout the dealership. As Max was led away in handcuffs, he glared at Jason. "You don't know what you've done. You've ruined everything." Jason watched him calmly. No, Max. You did that yourself. The journalist approached Jason, microphone in hand. Mr. Statham, any comment on how you uncovered this operation? Jason shrugged. Just doing the right thing. People like Max prey on trust and desperation. Someone had to stop him. The reporter smiled. Well, you've certainly made an impact. This story is going to blow up. As the last of the counterfeit cars was loaded onto police trucks, Jason walked out of the dealership, the sunlight hitting his face. Another scam shut down, another victory for justice. But for Jason, it was just another day. Jason sat in his car outside Max's dealership, the engine idling softly. The evidence he had gathered over the last 24 hours replayed in his mind like a chessboard of moves and countermoves. Every step Max had taken to manipulate and deceive was now laid bare. This was no ordinary scam. It was a sprawling web of fraud, counterfeit goods, and illegal financing, and Jason knew he had to dismantle it piece by piece. The question wasn't whether he would stop Max, it was how far Max would go to protect his empire. Taking a deep breath, Jason stepped out of the car, his calm exterior masking the storm within. He pushed open the glass doors of the dealership, the sound of the small bell above them jingling through the showroom. Max, seated at his desk in the center of the room, immediately noticed him. Jason, Max said, standing up with his usual salesman's grin plastered across his face. Back so soon. I knew you couldn't resist the McLaren. Jason returned the smile, but his eyes betrayed nothing. You're right, Max. I've been thinking a lot about the car. But before we finalize anything, I've got a few concerns. Max's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before his confidence returned. Concerns? Of course, mate. Let's sit down and talk it through. Customer satisfaction is my top priority. Jason walked to Max's desk, deliberately brushing past the display of the McLaren 720S. He ran a hand over the car's hood, his fingers trailing over the sleek surface. You've got a nice setup here, Max. Flashy cars, smooth pitches, and plenty of happy customers, I'm sure. Max chuckled, sitting down behind his desk. That's what we do here. Quality cars for discerning clients like yourself. What's on your mind, Jason? Jason turned, his smile fading as he leaned against the desk. Tell me, Max, how do you explain the aftermarket engine in a car that's supposed to be factory perfect? And the mismatched VIN numbers? Or the fact that the rare McLaren you're selling me has already been registered under 3 different names in 3 different states? Max's face stiffened, and for the first time, Jason saw the cracks in his facade. There's got to be some mistake, Max said, his tone defensive. You must have gotten bad information. I assure you, our cars are top-notch. Jason's voice dropped, low and menacing. Cut the act, Max. I know everything. The counterfeit cars, the predatory loans, the storage lot filled with knockoffs. This isn't just a shady operation, it's a criminal enterprise. Max sat frozen, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. But then, as if flipping a switch, he laughed, a nervous, forced sound. Listen, Jason, you've got it all wrong. This is just a misunderstanding. I'd never do anything illegal. Jason leaned in closer. You're not as clever as you think. The trail you've left behind is sloppy. Bank records, fake part suppliers, disgruntled customers who've been burned. You've been scamming the wrong people, Max. And now you've scammed the wrong guy. Max's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. He reached under his desk, pressing a concealed button. Jason's sharp instincts caught the subtle movement, but he didn't flinch. He knew exactly what was coming. Moments later, 2 large men entered the showroom from a side door. Jason recognized one of them from his visit to the storage lot, a burly, scar-faced thug with a reputation for doing Max's dirty work. The other man, equally intimidating, cracked his knuckles as he sized Jason up. You've got guts coming in here and accusing me, Max said, his voice cold and sharp. But guts won't get you far, mate. You're out of your league. Jason crossed his arms, unfazed. Is this how you deal with all your problems, Max? Throwing hired muscles at them? It's pathetic. The scar-faced thug stepped forward, sneering. "You've got a big mouth, pal. Let's see how tough you really are." The thug lunged at Jason, throwing a wild punch aimed at his head. Jason sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back. A swift kick to the back of the thug's knee sent him crashing to the floor, groaning in pain. The second thug rushed in, swinging a tire iron he had grabbed from a nearby workbench. Jason ducked under the swing, delivering a precise elbow strike to the man's ribs. The thug staggered but quickly regained his footing, charging at Jason again. This time, Jason grabbed a display stand and used it to block the attack, knocking the tire iron out of the thug's hands. With a fluid motion, he swept the man's legs out from under him, sending him sprawling onto the polished showroom floor. Scarface recovered and came at Jason from behind, but Jason anticipated the move. He spun around, grabbing a nearby car key fob and using it to jab into the thug's shoulder. The man howled in pain, clutching his arm as he stumbled backward. Max watched the chaos unfold, his face pale with shock. His hired goons, his so-called insurance, were no match for Jason's precision and skill. "Enough," Max shouted, his voice trembling. "Stop this right now." Jason turned to him, his expression calm but deadly serious. "It's over, Max. Your operation is finished." Max backed away, his hands raised defensively. "Wait. We can work something out. I'll cut you a deal. Anything you want." Jason ignored him, pulling out his phone and dialing a number. "It's time someone else heard about this." Max's eyes widened in panic. "Who are you calling?" Jason gave him a cold smile. "The police. And a few friends in the press who'll love this story." Realizing his time was up, Max made a desperate dash toward the back exit. But Jason was faster. He stepped in front of the door, blocking Max's escape. "You're not going anywhere," Jason said. Within minutes, the police arrived, followed closely by a journalist Jason had tipped off earlier. The officers quickly took Max into custody, while the journalist began documenting the counterfeit cars and fraudulent paperwork scattered throughout the dealership. As Max was led away in handcuffs, he glared at Jason. "You don't know what you've done. You've ruined everything." Jason watched him calmly. "No, Max. You did that yourself." The journalist approached Jason, microphone in hand. "Mr. Statham, any comment on how you uncovered this operation?" Jason shrugged. "People like Max prey on trust and desperation. Someone had to stop him." The reporter smiled. "You've certainly made an impact. This story is going to blow up." As the counterfeit cars were loaded onto police trucks, Jason walked out of the dealership. The sunlight hit his face as he stepped onto the sidewalk, a small but satisfied smile playing on his lips. Another scam dismantled, another victory for justice. For Jason, it was just another day of doing the right thing. The scene outside the dealership was chaotic as flashing blue and red lights illuminated the night. Police officers swarmed the premises, combing through every inch of the flashy showroom and the hidden storage lots Jason had uncovered. Each car, once presented as a luxury dream, was exposed as a counterfeit, a symbol of Max's greed and deception. Jason stood at the edge of the commotion, arms crossed, watching as justice began to take shape. Officers loaded crates of fake parts and fraudulent documents into evidence vans. Several of Max's employees, who had been complicit in the operation, were questioned and taken into custody. Jason caught snippets of their conversations, pleas of ignorance, half-hearted attempts to shift blame, but none of it mattered now. Max was already in handcuffs, sitting in the back of a patrol car with a dazed look on his face. His slick confidence had crumbled, replaced by the grim realization that his empire of lies had come crashing down. Jason approached the officer in charge, a seasoned detective named Harris, who was reviewing the evidence gathered so far. "You've got everything you need," Jason said. "The counterfeit cars, the fraudulent financing schemes, and the supplier connections. Max won't be able to worm his way out of this." Detective Harris nodded. "Thanks to you, we've got a rock-solid case. It's not every day someone risks their neck to bring down an operation like this." Jason shrugged, his tone matter-of-fact. It wasn't about risk, it was about doing the right thing. People trusted Max, and he destroyed lives for profit. Someone had to stop him. Harris gave Jason a knowing look. You've done more than stop him. You've given a lot of people a chance to reclaim what they lost. While the police handled the legal side of things, Jason turned his attention to the real victims of Max's schemes, the customers. Many of them had been left with crippling debt and faulty cars that were worthless. Jason had spent time before confronting Max gathering evidence of these scams, and now he intended to make sure they were compensated. Jason reached out to a local legal aid organization, sharing all the documentation he had uncovered. He also contacted the car manufacturers whose names had been tarnished by Max's counterfeit operation, urging them to step in and assist the victims. Within days, a plan was in motion. The manufacturers offered to replace the fake vehicles with legitimate ones at a fraction of the cost, while the legal aid team worked to renegotiate the predatory loans Max had pushed on his customers. News outlets picked up the story, putting pressure on financial institutions to waive unfair debts and make amends. Jason didn't seek recognition for his role in this process. His satisfaction came from seeing the relief on people's faces as they realized they were finally free from the nightmare Max had trapped them in. Max's downfall was swift and severe. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the media coverage only added to his disgrace. His once luxurious lifestyle was stripped away as the courts froze his assets and seized the dealership. During his trial, several victims testified, sharing how Max's scams had ruined their lives. Families spoke of losing their savings, individuals recounted the humiliation of being conned, and former employees admitted their guilt in aiding his schemes. Max tried to spin a narrative of his own, claiming he was a victim of circumstance, that he never intended to hurt anyone, but the jury saw through his lies. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, with no hope of rebuilding the empire he had lost. With the case closed and justice served, Jason quietly faded from the spotlight. He had no interest in fame or accolades. His goal had always been to right a wrong, and that mission was accomplished. As he walked through the streets of the city, Jason noticed a small group gathered around a television in a store window. The evening news was covering the fallout from Max's operation, highlighting the steps being taken to compensate the victims. A woman in the crowd turned to Jason, not recognizing him. "It's good to see someone finally taking down people like that," she said. "It gives you hope, doesn't it?" Jason smiled faintly, his eyes focused on the screen. "Yeah," he said. "It does." In the days that followed, Jason received a few anonymous thank-you notes, victims who had somehow pieced together his involvement and wanted to express their gratitude. He kept the notes in a drawer, not out of pride, but as a reminder of the impact one person could have when they stood up against injustice. For Jason, the experience was just another chapter in his life. He didn't see himself as a hero, just someone who refused to look the other way. And as he drove off into the night, he knew there would always be another battle to fight, another wrong to right. Because for Jason, making a difference wasn't a one-time act, it was who he was. The story of Max and his fraudulent empire serves as a powerful reminder of how greed can consume even the most charismatic and seemingly successful individuals. Max's downfall was not just about getting caught, it was about the cost of his choices. His insatiable hunger for wealth blinded him to the pain and suffering he caused, ultimately leading to the destruction of everything he had built. But at the heart of this tale lies another truth: the power of integrity. Jason's actions exemplified what it means to stand up for what is right, even when it is not the easy path. He could have walked away, leaving Max's victims to fend for themselves. Instead, he chose to fight back, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. This story is not just about exposing corruption. It is about the ripples of justice that one person's courage can create. Jason's efforts brought closure and relief to countless victims and sent a clear message that no one is untouchable when they exploit others. His quiet departure reminds us that heroism does not always come with a spotlight. Sometimes, it is found in actions that speak louder than words. For all of us, this is a lesson in the choices we make. Greed and deception may promise short-term gains, but they inevitably lead to ruin. Integrity, on the other hand, builds trust, inspires hope, and creates lasting change. As we reflect on this story, let it serve as a call to action, to stand against injustice, to help those in need, and to choose integrity over greed. Because in the end, it is not what we take from the world that defines us, it is what we give back.